Hello, beautiful people. I'm so excited to talk with you today about something that I know frustrates so many English learners. You spend hours studying new words, writing them down, repeating them over and over, and then what happens? A week later, you completely forget them. Does this sound familiar? Don't worry, you're not alone. This happens to everyone, and today I'm going to share with you the secrets that will help you remember English words forever. Let me start by telling you a little story. When I was learning Spanish, I had the exact same problem. I would learn a new word, feel so proud of myself, and then the next day it was completely gone from my brain. I was so frustrated. I thought, what's wrong with me? Why can't I remember anything? But then I discovered something amazing. The problem wasn't with my brain. The problem was with the way I was trying to learn the words. You see, most people think that memorizing vocabulary is like filling up a bucket with water. You just keep pouring words in and they stay there. But that's not how our brains work at all. Our brains are much more like a garden. If you want something to grow and stay healthy in a garden, you need to water it regularly, give it sunlight, and take care of it. Words in our memory are exactly the same. So let's talk about why we forget words in the first place. There are actually three main reasons why this happens, and once you understand these reasons, everything will make so much more sense. The first reason is something called the forgetting curve. This is a real scientific concept discovered by a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus. He found that we forget most new information very quickly. In fact, within just one day, we forget about 50% of what we learned. Within a week, we forget about 90%. Isn't that crazy? But here's the good news. This is completely normal, and there are ways to fight against it. The second reason we forget words is because we learn them in isolation. What do I mean by this? Well, imagine you see the word magnificent in your vocabulary book. You read it, you understand it means very beautiful or impressive, and you think you've learned it. But you haven't connected it to anything else in your mind. It's just sitting there all alone, with no friends, no context, no story. Words that are alone in our minds are the first ones to disappear. The third reason is that we don't use our emotions when we learn. Our brains remember things much better when we have strong feelings about them. Think about it. You probably remember exactly where you were when something really exciting or scary happened to you, right? But you might not remember what you had for lunch 3 days ago. That's because one experience had strong emotions attached to it, and the other didn't. Now that we understand why we forget, let me share with you the most powerful techniques to make sure you never forget English words again. These are methods that I've used myself, and that thousands of my students have used successfully. The first technique is called spaced repetition, and it's like magic for your memory. Remember that forgetting curve I mentioned? Well, spaced repetition is designed to fight against it. Here's how it works. Instead of reviewing a word once and hoping you'll remember it forever, you review it multiple times, but with increasing gaps between each review. Let me give you an example. Let's say you learn the word anxious today. Tonight, before you go to bed, review it once. Tomorrow, review it again. Then wait 2 days and review it again. Then wait 4 days. Then wait a week. Then wait 2 weeks. Each time you successfully remember the word, you wait a little longer before reviewing it again. This technique tricks your brain into moving the word from short-term memory into long-term memory, where it will stay forever. You don't have to calculate these time gaps yourself. There are amazing apps like Anki, Quizlet, or Memrise that do all the math for you. They'll show you exactly which words to review and when. It's like having a personal memory coach in your pocket. The second technique is creating vivid mental images. Our brains are incredible at remembering pictures, much better than remembering words alone. So for every new word you learn, create a crazy, funny, or dramatic mental picture. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say you want to remember the word stubborn. Instead of just repeating, stubborn means not willing to change your mind. Create a picture in your head. Imagine a giant stone statue that refuses to move, even when people are pushing it with all their strength. The statue has its arms crossed and a grumpy expression. It's being stubborn. The crazier and more unusual your mental image is, the better you'll remember it. Don't make boring pictures. Make them colorful, loud, funny, or even a little silly. Your brain loves unusual things and will hold on to them much longer. The third technique is my absolute favorite, and it's called the story method. This is where you stop learning words one by one, and instead, you learn them as part of an exciting story. Here's how it works. Let's say you want to learn these 5 words: mysterious, ancient, discover, treasure, and dangerous. Instead of studying them separately, create one story that uses all of them. Last night, I had the most mysterious dream. I was walking through an ancient forest when I discovered a hidden cave. Inside the cave was a chest full of treasure. But suddenly, I realized that the cave was dangerous because it was starting to collapse. Do you see how much easier it is to remember all 5 words when they're connected in a story? Plus, you're not just learning the words, you're learning how they work together in natural English. This is so much more powerful than memorizing definitions. Another incredibly effective technique is using your body and your senses. This is called kinesthetic learning, and it works because it involves your whole body in the learning process, not just your brain. When you learn a new word, don't just read it silently. Say it out loud with expression. If it's the word whisper, say it in a soft, quiet voice. If it's the word shout, say it loudly. Move your hands, make facial expressions, use your whole body to act out the word. You can also connect words to smells, sounds, or physical sensations. For example, if you're learning the word sour, taste something sour like a lemon while you say the word. If you're learning smooth, touch something smooth like silk or glass. These sensory connections create multiple pathways in your brain, making it almost impossible to forget the word. Let me tell you about another powerful technique called the association method. This is where you connect new English words to words you already know in your native language, but not in the way you might think. Instead of just translating, you create funny or memorable connections. For example, let's say you're learning the word kitchen. Maybe in your language, there's a word that sounds similar to kitchen. You create a silly story or image that connects the two sounds. The funnier or more unusual the connection, the stronger your memory will be. One of the biggest mistakes I see students make is trying to learn too many words at once. They think, if I study 50 words today, I'll learn English faster. But this actually makes you learn slower, not faster. Your brain gets overwhelmed and confused. Instead, focus on learning 5 to 10 new words really well, rather than learning 50 words poorly. It's much better to completely master a small number of words than to kind of know a large number of words. Here's something that will completely change how you think about learning vocabulary. Stop trying to learn words, start trying to learn phrases. Native English speakers don't think in individual words. We think in phrases and chunks of language. For example, instead of just learning the word make, learn these phrases. Make a decision, make a mistake, make progress, make sense, make an effort. When you learn words as part of phrases, you automatically learn how to use them correctly in real conversations. This brings me to one of the most important points of this entire lesson. You must use new words in real situations as soon as possible. Learning a word and using a word are two completely different things. If you want to truly own a word, you need to use it. Start simple. When you learn a new word, immediately create 3 sentences with it. But don't make boring sentences like, "The dog is big." Make personal sentences about your own life. "My brother is really stubborn when he doesn't want to do his homework." "I discovered a fantastic new restaurant yesterday." "This math problem is so confusing." Even better, try to use new words when you're talking to yourself. I know this might sound strange, but talking to yourself is actually one of the best ways to practice English. When you're cooking, describe what you're doing using new vocabulary. When you're walking, tell yourself a story using the words you learned this week. Here's a technique that's incredibly powerful, but that most people never try. It's called teaching others. When you teach someone else a new word, you have to understand it so deeply that it becomes permanently fixed in your memory. You don't need to be a teacher to do this. Teach your family members, your friends, even your pets. Explain the word, give examples, create sentences. If you don't have anyone to teach, pretend you're making a YouTube video explaining the word to other English learners. Now let me share with you some practical daily habits that will make remembering vocabulary automatic and effortless. First, create a word of the day routine. Every morning, choose one word that you want to focus on for that entire day. Write it on a piece of paper and put it somewhere you'll see it often, like on your bathroom mirror or your computer screen. Throughout the day, try to use that word as many times as possible in your thoughts and conversations. Second, start a vocabulary journal, but make it fun and creative. Don't just write definitions. For each new word, write the word, a simple definition, 3 example sentences, a personal sentence about your own life, and draw a little picture or diagram. The act of writing by hand actually helps your brain remember better than typing on a computer. Third, change the language on your phone and computer to English. This might seem scary at first, but you'll be amazed at how quickly you learn new words when you encounter them in context every single day. You'll learn words like settings, download, battery, and notification naturally without even trying. Fourth, find English content that you genuinely enjoy. If you love cooking, watch cooking shows in English. If you love sports, read sports news in English. If you love music, look up the lyrics to your favorite English songs. When you're enjoying yourself, learning feels effortless, and you remember new words much more easily. Let me tell you about something called active recall, which is one of the most scientifically proven ways to strengthen your memory. Instead of just reading your vocabulary lists over and over, test yourself regularly. Cover up the definitions and try to remember what each word means. Cover up the words and try to remember them from the definitions. Write the words on one side of a card and the meanings on the other side. Quiz yourself going both directions. The harder you have to work to remember something, the stronger that memory becomes. Here's something really important that many students don't realize. Different types of words require different learning strategies. Action words, which we call verbs, are best learned by doing the actions. If you're learning jump, actually jump. If you're learning whistle, actually whistle. Describing words, which we call adjectives, are best learned through comparisons and examples. If you're learning enormous, compare it to big and huge. Find pictures of enormous things like elephants, skyscrapers, or mountains. Feeling words which describe emotions are best learned by connecting them to personal experiences. When you learn the word frustrated, think about a time when you felt really frustrated. What happened? How did it feel in your body? This personal connection makes the word unforgettable. Let me share with you a mistake that I made for years and that I see my students make all the time. We focus too much on learning difficult or impressive words, and we ignore the simple, common words. This is backwards. The most important words to learn deeply are the simple, everyday words that native speakers use constantly. Words like get, make, take, put, come, and go. These words might seem boring, but they're used in hundreds of different ways, and mastering them will make your English sound much more natural. For example, the word get can mean receive, become, understand, arrive, catch, buy, and many other things. Instead of trying to learn one complicated word that you might use once a month, spend time really understanding how to use these simple words that you'll use every single day. Here's a wonderful technique for visual learners. Create a word map for each new word you learn. Put the word in the center of a piece of paper, then around it, write synonyms, antonyms, example sentences, related words, and personal connections. Draw lines connecting everything together. This creates a web of associations in your brain that makes forgetting almost impossible. One thing that makes English particularly challenging is that many words have multiple meanings. The word bank can mean a financial institution or the side of a river. The word bat can mean a flying animal or a piece of sports equipment. Instead of seeing this as a problem, see it as an opportunity. When you encounter a word with multiple meanings, learn all the meanings together. Create different sentences for each meaning. This actually helps you remember better because you have more mental pathways leading to the same word. Let me tell you about something called the generation effect. This is a fancy term for a simple idea. You remember things better when you create them yourself rather than just reading them. So instead of copying example sentences from your textbook, create your own example sentences. Instead of reading someone else's story, write your own story using new vocabulary. Here's a daily practice that takes just 5 minutes, but will revolutionize your vocabulary learning. At the end of each day, before you go to sleep, think about all the English words you encountered that day. Maybe you heard a word in a movie, read a word in an article, or learned a word in class. Choose 3 words that were new or interesting to you, and create a mental movie using all 3 words. For example, let's say your 3 words are delicious, exhausted, and proud. Create a little movie in your mind. After running a marathon, I was completely exhausted. But when I got home, my family had prepared the most delicious meal to celebrate, and I felt so proud of what I had accomplished. This bedtime routine helps move new words from your short-term memory into your long-term memory while you sleep. It's like magic. Now, I want to talk about something that many English learners struggle with: the fear of making mistakes with new vocabulary. Let me tell you something important. Mistakes are not your enemy, they are your teacher. When you use a word incorrectly, and someone corrects you, or you realize your mistake, that correction creates a strong memory. You're much more likely to remember the correct usage after making a mistake than if you had just read the correct usage in a book. So don't be afraid to experiment with new words. Use them in conversations, even if you're not 100% sure you're using them correctly. Most people will understand what you mean, and the few times you make mistakes will actually help you learn faster. Here's something that will completely change your relationship with English vocabulary. Stop thinking of words as separate, isolated items that you need to memorize. Instead, think of them as tools in a toolbox. Each word is a tool that helps you express a specific idea or feeling. When you need to express something, don't ask yourself, "What words do I know?" Instead, ask yourself, "What do I want to communicate?" Then choose the best tool, the best word for that specific job. This mindset shift makes vocabulary learning much more natural and practical. Let me share with you one of the most powerful vocabulary learning techniques I've ever discovered, the explanation challenge. Here's how it works. Take a word that you think you know well and try to explain it to someone who has never heard it before, without using the word itself or any synonyms. For example, try to explain the word nervous without saying nervous, anxious, worried, or scared. You might say something like, "It's the feeling you get in your stomach before you have to speak in public, when your hands might shake a little and your heart beats faster." This exercise forces you to truly understand the word at a deep level. If you can't explain a word clearly, you don't really know it yet. One of the most common questions I get is, "How many words should I learn per day?" The answer might surprise you. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. It's better to learn 3 words really well than to learn 20 words superficially. When I say learn really well, I mean you can use the word in multiple sentences. You understand its different meanings. You know which situations it's appropriate for, and you can explain it to someone else. That kind of deep learning takes time, but it creates permanent memories. Here's a technique that works especially well for busy people: microlearning sessions. Instead of trying to study vocabulary for 1 hour straight, break it into tiny 5-minute sessions throughout your day. Review 3 words while you're drinking your morning coffee. Practice using them in sentences while you're walking to work. Test yourself on their meanings while you're waiting for the bus. These short, frequent sessions are actually more effective than long, infrequent study sessions. Let me tell you about the power of context clues. Native English speakers don't know every word in the dictionary, but we're very good at figuring out the meaning of unfamiliar words from the context, from the situation, and the other words around them. You can develop this skill too. When you encounter a new word, before you look it up in a dictionary, try to guess its meaning from the context. Look at the words before and after it. Think about the topic of the conversation or article. What would make sense in that situation? Even if your guess isn't exactly right, the process of thinking and guessing creates a strong memory pathway. Then, when you do look up the correct meaning, your brain will remember it much better because you've already been thinking about it. Here's something really interesting about how our brains work. We remember beginnings and endings much better than middles. This is called the serial position effect. You can use this to your advantage when learning vocabulary. When you're studying a list of words, spend extra time on the words in the middle of the list. Review the beginning and ending words less frequently because your brain naturally remembers them better anyway. Also, when you're creating sentences with new words, put the new word either at the beginning or at the end of the sentence when possible. Magnificent was the sunset we saw last night, or the sunset we saw last night was truly magnificent. One of the most enjoyable ways to learn vocabulary is through games and puzzles. Crossword puzzles, word searches, Scrabble, and word association games all help strengthen your vocabulary in a fun, relaxed way. But here's the key: don't just play these games passively. When you encounter a word you don't know, write it down and look it up later. When you use a word in the game, try to use it in a conversation later that day. Make the games part of your active learning process. Let me share with you something that has helped thousands of my students: creating personal word families. This is where you group words together not by their dictionary definitions, but by their personal meaning to you. For example, you might create a words that describe my best friend family: loyal, hilarious, supportive, creative, adventurous. Or a words that describe how I feel about learning English family: challenging, exciting, frustrating, rewarding, necessary. When words have personal meaning and emotional connections, they become much easier to remember. You're not just learning abstract definitions, you're learning words that relate to your real life and your real feelings. Here's a technique that works especially well for advanced learners: synonym and antonym chains. Start with a simple word like happy, then find a synonym like joyful, then find a synonym for joyful like elated, then find a synonym for elated like ecstatic. Do the same thing with antonyms: happy, sad, miserable, depressed, devastated. This helps you understand the subtle differences between similar words and builds your vocabulary in a systematic way. One of the biggest challenges in vocabulary learning is retention over time. You might remember a word perfectly for a week, but then completely forget it a month later. This is normal, but there are ways to fight against it. The key is to encounter each word in multiple different contexts over time. Don't just learn the word generous from one example sentence. Encounter it in a story, hear it in a movie, use it in a conversation, read it in an article. Each different encounter strengthens the memory pathway. Here's something that many students don't realize: your vocabulary learning should match your English goals. If you want to have casual conversations with friends, focus on learning informal, everyday vocabulary. If you need English for business, focus on professional terminology. If you love reading novels, focus on descriptive and literary words. Don't try to learn everything at once. Choose vocabulary that matches your specific needs and interests. This targeted approach is much more efficient and motivating than trying to learn random words from a general vocabulary book. Let me tell you about one of the most powerful memory techniques ever discovered: the memory palace, or method of loci. This technique has been used for over 2,000 years, and it can help you remember huge amounts of vocabulary. Here's how it works. Think of a place you know very well, like your house or your school. Now, imagine walking through that place in a specific order. In each room or location, place a vivid image representing a word you want to remember. For example, in your kitchen, you might imagine a giant, magnificent peacock standing on your counter. In your living room, you might see a stubborn donkey sitting on your couch, refusing to move. In your bedroom, you might see yourself discovering a treasure chest under your bed. When you want to remember these words, you just take a mental walk through your memory palace. This technique might seem strange at first, but it's incredibly powerful once you get used to it. Here's something that will make your vocabulary learning much more efficient: learn word patterns and roots. Many English words are built from the same basic parts. If you learn these patterns, you can understand hundreds of new words without memorizing each one separately. For example, the prefix un means not, so if you know happy, you automatically know unhappy. If you know usual, you know unusual. The suffix full means full of, so wonderful means full of wonder, beautiful means full of beauty. Learning these patterns is like getting a skeleton key that opens many doors at once. Instead of learning 100 separate words, you learn 10 patterns that help you understand 100 words. One of the most important things to remember is that vocabulary learning is not a race. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Some days you'll learn quickly and remember everything easily. Other days you'll feel like you're forgetting more than you're learning. This is completely normal. The key is consistency, not perfection. It's better to study vocabulary for 10 minutes every single day than to study for 3 hours once a week. Small, consistent efforts over time create amazing results. Don't get discouraged if you forget words that you thought you had learned. This is part of the natural learning process. Just review them again, use them in new contexts, and be patient with yourself. Every time you relearn a word, it becomes stronger in your memory. Remember, learning English vocabulary is not just about memorizing words. It's about building the tools you need to express yourself, to share your thoughts and feelings, to connect with other people, and to achieve your dreams. Every new word you learn opens up new possibilities. Every phrase you master gives you more power to communicate exactly what you mean. Every vocabulary technique you practice makes you a more confident, fluent English speaker. So be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and remember that every single word you learn is a step forward on your English learning journey. You have everything you need to succeed. You just need to believe in yourself and keep moving forward, one word at a time. The most important thing I want you to remember from our time together today is this: you are capable of learning and remembering English vocabulary. It might take time, it might require effort, but you absolutely can do it. Thousands of people before you have done it, and you can too. Start with just one or two of the techniques I've shared with you today. Practice them consistently for a few weeks, and then add more techniques gradually. Don't try to do everything at once. Small steps, taken consistently, will take you exactly where you want to go. Your English learning journey is unique and beautiful. Trust the process, trust yourself, and most importantly, enjoy the adventure. Every word you learn is a gift you give to yourself, a tool that will serve you for the rest of your life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I believe in you, I'm cheering for you, and I can't wait to see how much your English vocabulary grows in the weeks and months to come. You've got this.